While we're waiting for the mic, but I'm going to get started on this beautiful girl here who very kindly offered to be my model. So what we're going to do, she already has some eyeliner on, she has her eyebrows done, but what we're going to do is we're just going to we've taken off her foundation and I'm going to do her full face base, and then I'm going to clean up her brows, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to create like a blonde smoky eye. So the first thing I'm going to do, we've taken her foundation off. What I'm going to do is apply some magic cream. So I'm using the Charlotte Tilbury magic cream. And I always use a foundation brush for this.
What is this magic?
I'll explain to you. So the magic cream is basically a day moisturizer. So it's mainly for daytime use. You don't use it for nighttime. What this is it has SPF in it, but it also helps to just give the skin that intense moisture, because the most important thing when you're doing makeup on someone, even on yourself, you've got to make sure that the skin is very well hydrated. If you don't create that perfect base underneath, your foundation isn't going to last all day and it ends up looking cakey later in the day. So you want it to look very clean and clear throughout the day. I think they've got the right. I'm just going to apply
And I'm just gonna sit here. So there is no need to use primer. We apply this cream. It's a base.
No, you don't need to use primer. I don't actually necessarily always use primer. I always use moisturizer. If I feel that someone's skin has very obvious pores, or I feel like it's not smooth, then that's why when I would end up using primer for the skin. I don't feel like she needs it. We're going to go straight in with the moisturizer. And now, because I can see that she has very dry skin, I can feel it. So I don't know how many of you are actual aspiring makeup artists, or how many of you are just generally makeup lovers and love doing it on doing makeup on yourself. But you need to really look at the texture of the skin and what you need to do to eradicate that problem so that you can actually create a good base for yourself. So what I'm doing is smoothing on moisturizer. This is with me. That wasn't me, I don't think. Okay, so we put the moisturizer on now. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go straight into her eye makeup. So usually what I do is if I'm putting heavy eyes on someone, I'll always do the prep the face first, and then I'll work onto the eyes, create the eyeshadow that I want to create, and then I move on to the brows. Then I finish the face after. The reason I do the foundation last is because if I'm doing heavy eyes, I want to make sure I get a really nice, clean, flawless base. If you do your base first and then you go in trying to do the eye makeup, you're going to drop something along the way, and it isn't so kind of flawless. Plus, once you've done the eye makeup, you get a really good idea of how much foundation and how much concealer you need. Sometimes it's difficult to gauge that if you've done foundation. So what I'm going to do is do a really quick bronze smoky eye. So I'm going to use the Tom Ford cream eyeshadow. This is in the bronze shade that they do. This is one of my favourite shades. And we're just going to, with my finger, I'm just going to put it over the lid, and I'm going to create a semicircle there. So I'm going to create just all over her lid. Face this way. And I'm going to just buff it out with a brush. So I'm getting a brush with nothing on there, and I'm buffing out the edges. So we're going to buff it into the socket line. And we're going to add some gold onto this just to give it a bit more sparkle. Just open for me. Okay, look straight ahead. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to use my finger to apply this. This is a super quick makeup look. There's not much blending involved, so it just makes it really easy. And when you're working with creams, it's much easier to blend rather than powders. When you're working with powders, It's a bit more difficult if you're kind of new to makeup and if you're not used to applying makeup. The good thing about creams is they last all day as well, so it won't budge, it won't fade. Just open. We're just going to put a small amount more on that lid just to give it a bit more depth. And I'm just buffing out the edges. So you can see how quick that was. What we've done is we've created one smoky eye. But now what I'm going to do is just add some sparkle to it because we want to give it a bit more of a pop. So I'm going to use an eyeshadow from Christian Dior, which is basically like a cream powder, and it has a slight sheen to it. So we're going to just apply this to the lid of the eye, and what that's going to do is give it more of a three-dimensional look. So it just makes it pop that little bit more. Close your eyes for me. So you can see how that gives it that nice sheen. It's almost like a very subtle metallic look. And because we've put a cream on underneath, any powder that you put on top of the cream is going to really kind of hold it in so it doesn't fade. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to just clean up her eyebrows. So because her eyebrows are already done, I'm just going to clean them up. And the way that I clean up eyebrows is I basically use a concealer, so a very opaque finish concealer, and I use a lip brush. So I keep so many lip brushes in my kit. The reason for that is because with a lip brush, the actual hair that they use on a lip brush is much thicker and stiffer than a usual fluff brush, and it stays together. The shape of the lip brush doesn't really kind of distort after so many uses, so that's why I like to use it, and it's flat, so we're going to get a really nice clean finish. So I'm just going to get some concealer onto my hand here, and this is where I'm going to reshape her brows. So I'm just going to kind of clean around the edges here. And sometimes this is a good way to kind of refresh your makeup. Say if you've had your makeup on all day and you have an evening event, but you don't want to take all of it off and redo it for the evening. So what you can do is just take your base off, start working on your eyebrows, just clean them up, add something to your eyelids, and then just do a new fresh base. So we're just going to clean up the edges. And then once we've done the base, I'm going to just go back and just give her brows just a little bit more definition. She already has some colour in them. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is we're going to move on to her base now. I'm going to put the lashes on last, and the reason for that is because I just want to see what the overall look looks like before I put the lashes on. Okay, so what we're going to do now is start with the contouring. This is probably one of my favourite bits. I know that we've gone through a trend of contouring, but I still love it. I've been doing it for years, and I think it's just great at just reshaping people's faces and just helping them. Some of my clients basically say to me, you know, I want you to make my nose look slimmer, I want you to make my forehead look smaller. So everything that you have to do to achieve that is always contouring in different ways. There's not just one way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an opaque concealer. I usually mix my shades. Very rarely do I use one shade.
You prefer cream contouring rather than powder contouring?
Yes, I very rarely powder contour. I don't use a lot of powder on the face only because I like cream, because it just kind of sticks to the skin better, it sinks into the skin better. When you're using powders, the only problem is when you reapply it, it just starts sitting on top of each layer. With cream, you can really kind of mix it in and it blends nicely. And even later on in the day, if you feel like you've got a subtle shine come through, you can still always get your beauty blender and buff it out. Whereas when you've got powder, trying to buff powder is very difficult. So I would always say to use cream. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give her I don't want to give her too much of a heavy base, but sometimes even when you want a light base, it does involve a bit more makeup. Now when I do my contouring, I like to give it like I call it like the facelift effect. So for me, when I'm contouring, it's all about direction. It's all about which direction I'm taking the contour up to. So with this, I'm taking it up into the kind of temples because I want to lift everything from the face. So just look up for me. So we're going to give her some coverage on the under eye area. And can you see how I've just taken it up into the temples? Okay, so for me, when I'm doing makeup on anyone, for me the under eye area is so important, especially here in the Middle East. I feel like most of my clients, the first thing that they ask for is, can you just cover my dark circles? Or can you just make me look completely flawless on the under eye area? So that for me is very important. I think if you can get the base right and you can get the under eye area right, then everything else kind of like falls into place. So next up, what I'm going to do is just add some definition to her face. So we're going to use like a darker shade and just face that way for me. And we're just going to put a small amount here and a small amount here just to enhance her cheekbones a bit. And I'm just going to put a small amount here and here. Okay, so personally for me, I like to get a nice kind of, I don't like the face to look very flat, so I like to add a few different shades so that once I've kind of merged them all together, it gives a really nice three-dimensional look and it looks nice and healthy. So what I'm going to do now is just buff in these areas. So I'm going to start with the light shade first. And I'm just buffing it in, and then I'm going to apply a light layer of foundation. Face this way for me. We'll do the dark shade last. Look up to me. So I'm going to get a smaller brush now, and just look up. So the under eye area, we're going to just buff it out so that all of the edges are nice and blended. So you just don't want to see any harsh lines. Face forward. Right, now we're going to buff out the darker shade. And see, this is another reason why you should have a good amount of moisturizer on underneath, because when you're buffing all of this out, you want it to be able to mix in, yeah. You don't want the skin to be too dry. So on top of this, we're going to put our foundation, and that's going to kind of disguise wherever you can see any kind of like dark shade. Right, so the contour's done. Now we're going to apply our foundation. So I'm going to use the Makeup Forever Ultra HD. And I've got a little bit of the Cover FX Power Play because it's one of my favourites at the moment. I'm going to mix this together. And now we're going to start buffing it in. Now you need to remember that even though the foundation that I put in my hand and I've mixed is a tiny bit darker than her skin tone, the reason for that is because we've got a much lighter base now. So we've created a lighter shade on her skin than what it actually was before. So I need to kind of balance it out. That's why we've got a slightly warmer shade. So now we're buffing it in, and then you always dab. You never kind of go back and forth. And then we're going to do the under eye area. Face this way for me and look up. And you can see how I'm still taking it, face that way, in the same direction as where we actually applied the contouring. Look up for me. So can you see how I'm doing it stage by stage? I'm doing it on every section that I actually applied the lighter shade of the contouring. So I'm going to move on to the cheekbone areas last, because that's where there's a darker shade, so we can cover that section at the end. So I'm going to go to the jawline, make sure it's all blended in nicely. And this way.
El short of this. Yeah.
And look up for me.
You get more people rushing
And face forward.
not the full sheet. It's just an extra.
Now we're going to go over the cheekbone area, and this is where you can see how it just kind of covers it up, but you can just see a very subtle amount of the contour come through. Okay, and look this way. And straight ahead. Okay, so you can see how now, even though we've put a couple of layers on, it doesn't look like it's overly heavy. Now what we're going to do is set it. Now this is a technique that I use to set so that it just doesn't move for the next 12 hours. It stays put. And this is something that I do on a lot of my brides as well, because obviously I do a lot of destination weddings. So they're always getting married in amazing places like Maldives, Bali, on the beach. They always have beach weddings. So for me it's really important that their makeup lasts throughout that heat, especially all my local VIP clients out here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the under eye area first, because that to me is the biggest concern. I need to make sure that it doesn't crease later on, and I need to make sure that it stays put and it always looks flawless on the under eye area. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use the Laura Mercier setting powder. To be honest, I get asked all the time which powder is the best one, and it varies from person to person. Sometimes I like to use the Marc Jacobs coconut setting powder because it's super fine and it's great for people who are not used to wearing a lot of makeup. So from working on, I don't know, you've probably seen, some faces can take a lot of makeup, some faces can't take that much makeup. It just doesn't suit them. It's down to their skin, their features, overall how they look, and their personality. So thankfully she can actually take a lot of makeup. She suits it. You know, some people don't suit it. So if I'm working on someone who doesn't suit a lot of makeup, I always use the Marc Jacobs coconut setting powder because it's super fine. And if I wanted to, if there's slightly more makeup that I put on, then I always use this one. Okay, just look up for me now. So what we want to do is we want to make sure it's still, there's no creases there. I'm going to go in with my powder and I'm going to press it with my sponge and create the same shape that I created with my contouring. And what we're going to do is put a little bit more just on areas that she may shine. So forehead, nose and chin. And now I'm going to go in with another brush. Just a smaller brush and a bigger brush. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dust off the powder. So I'm just going to kind of buff it out. I don't like to kind of brush because what's the point of doing that when you put all that effort into to create that flawless base. Okay, look up for me. And this I'm going to go with a smaller brush and I'm very lightly dusting away this powder. Look up for me. Face forward. So that's set her base now. So you can see how now it's given it a nice flawless finish. Next thing we want to do is finish off the eyebrows and the eyes. So what I'm going to do with the eyes is I'm going to apply some more of this cream, but I'm going to apply it to the lower lash line. So we're going to get a small amount with like a pencil brush, and I'm going to buff it into the lower lash line. Okay, look up for me. You basically want to go just where her lower lashes are and just go back 4, so that it really buffs into the lash line. But at the same time, I don't want it to look too harsh. I want it to look like it's just fading out, so it's more of a really nice smoky effect. Okay, so I think that's enough on that side. Look up for me. I'm going to do the same on this side. And you just fade it out at the end. Okay. And you can go as heavy as you want with this, or as light as you want. It really depends on what your preference is. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to now clean up the brows just a little bit more. So I'm going to add some product just to give it more of a sharper finish. So I'm going to use the dip brow, and I'm using the shade Chocolate with the Anastasia brush. I always keep tissue at hand, because the trick is when you're using a flat angled brush, the whole point of that is that it's super fine, and sometimes the brushes can become a bit fluffy. So what you need to do is I always reshape my brush myself. So I coat it fully on both sides, and then I squeeze the excess off, because I don't want to go onto the face with all of that product. So I squeeze all the excess off, so I've got a super fine brush, and then this is where I'm just going to create feather strokes. So I don't colour it all in, but I just create feather strokes to just replicate her hair. And it depends on the type of face that I'm working on, because with some clients they prefer it a bit more stronger, but I think the feather brow really suits you, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, and we're going to make sure the other side is exactly the same. And we're just going to add some mascara, some brown mascara on top. Just to hold the brows in place. Face forward, and that's going to lighten them slightly as well for us. So we're going to just coat it with some Anastasia brow gel. I'm using, I think this is Chocolate. I never go in with the actual brush, so I just coat it slightly on both sides, and then I just brush it through. I'm going to brush her brows up because she's got good brows, and they look good brushed up. Face forward. Okay, and next up we're going to add some lashes, and this is where I'm going to use my own brand lashes. So like I mentioned earlier in the panel, these are available at Bloomingdale's in Dubai Mall. They're also available in Harvey Nichols in the Mall of Emirates, and you can also purchase them on unas.com. And we have 9 different styles. I think what I'm going to do is probably go with Amelia, which is slightly lighter, and this gives more of a natural fluffy look. So the first thing I'm going to do is check to see whether they need to be trimmed. So the way to apply lashes is you want to first make sure that the length is correct. So you always measure it. Now, when you're looking after lashes, with these lashes, with any lashes within my range, you can use them from anything to 15 to 30 times. Now, that's if you look after them correctly. So with my lashes that I'm wearing now, I'm wearing the style Nina. The reason I named them Nina is because during my design phase, they were my favorite. They were the ones that I always went for when I was looking for lashes to wear. So these are the ones that I designed according to my own personal signature style. And funnily enough, they seem to be really popular because we've sold out of them completely. I'm going to use Amelia. This is the second most popular lash that we have because it's very light and natural. It's not overly long. It looks great if you just even want to wear it in the daytime, or if you just want a nice, subtle, fluffy look in the evening as well. So the trick is you always lift the lash from the strip. So always either use your fingers or you use your tweezers, but you always lift it from the strip, never pull from the hair. You have to understand that because these are mink lashes, they're very delicate. So they've been sewn in very delicately. They are made to last, so they're very strong, but at the same time it's hair. It's ultra fine, so you can't pull it because you are going to end up probably ruining the lash that way and the style of the lash. So we pulled the lash off. First thing that I'm going to do is hold the lash in the middle by the hair, not by the strip, and we're going to place it on the bed of her lash. Face this way for me, and I'm just going to see what the length is like first. Close. Open. Close. I actually think we just need to trim this the tiniest amount at the end, and then I think we're good to apply them. So I'm going to trim them. Now, if you ever need to trim lashes, like I always need to trim lashes for myself, for self-application, because they're always just a little bit too long for me. If you trim them, you always trim them from the end of the lash, never from the inner corner of the lash, because the way that lashes are designed, well, the way that mine are designed, are that they replicate your natural lash. So the inner corner of the false lash is always a little bit shorter, so you always cut from the end. So what we're going to do is cut just a small amount from the end. Now, if you're only cutting a small amount, then that's different, but sometimes for my own lashes, I cut quite a thick amount off. So what I do is I actually keep that, because you can use it as end lashes, like fake lashes, just to put on at the end of your lash. So don't ever throw them, because you can always use them. Okay, so now we've trimmed this, I'm going to apply some glue. I always like using black glue. We are in the process of coming out with our own glue soon.
Yeah, I was about to ask this.
We are, yeah. One thing at a time. So I'm going to apply this now to the lashes. And I always use the end of a brush, and I always apply just a thin amount on the lash. Not too much, but at the same time, not too little either. So you want to coat it evenly. I've seen sometimes people apply it and it's very uneven. You've got to make sure that it's even all the way across. And obviously you don't have to do both of them at the same time, but I'm just so used to putting the glue on at the same time. It's just Now also, I always prefer to put the glue on the back of my hand before I apply them. Like some people apply it straight from the tube. I wouldn't recommend that, because you just don't have much control over how much is actually coming out of the tube, and it's very difficult to get a good, clean, easy line, because the hole is actually quite large on the tube. So what we're going to do is let this dry just a little bit, and then we're going to apply it. So we're going to let it semi-dry, usually about 30 seconds, and wait for it to be tacky. Then once it's tacky, we're going to apply it, because if you apply it straight in now, it's just going to slide everywhere because the glue is still wet. And that's the worst thing, because it just ruins your entire look. So we're going to wait for it just a little while. Any questions about lashes at the moment? Do you guys all wear lashes?
No.
Do you wear lashes?
Sometimes.
Now you do.
Okay, not all the time. I'm not that great at applying, but I feel like I'm learning now. So.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I think we'll apply this. Right, we're going to just check it. It's a bit tacky now, so we'll apply this. Okay, close your eyes for me, chin up. We're going to place it on the bed of the lash. Keep your eyes closed. I'm not going to stick it down yet. I've only placed it in the middle, on the bed of the lash. Same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to get her to open her eyes and look at me so I know the placement is correct. Look at me. Okay, close. We can move this one along just a little bit. Keep your eyes closed. Face this way, keep them closed. Okay, now keep your eyes closed. Right, so now we've stuck down the ends. So you can see how we put it on the bed of the lash. The bed of the lash always means the point at which your root of your upper lash and your skin meets. So that is where you should be sticking your actual lash down. It's not so much whether it's on skin or lash, it's kind of right in the middle where they both meet. And what we're going to do is we're going to let this set. Now for me it's really important that you let the lash dry thoroughly, because the worst thing that can happen is that the ends of the lash start coming off. So we're just going to wait for this to dry properly. And then I'm going to show you the rolling technique, which is what I use.
And you have to keep your eyes closed while it's drying? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if you're applying it on yourself, like for example, when I apply, I always just look down into the mirror. So it's different when you're applying it on yourself. Always look down into the mirror and then, but it's the same principle. You still apply it to the bed of the lash. Make sure you've got the placement right, and then you just tuck in the outer corners and then the inner corners. But you've got to make sure that you trim it appropriately, because if you don't leave a gap here, it's going to start irritating your tear duct. So you've got to leave. I actually prefer leaving a bigger gap there, because I just don't like that. I've got sensitive eyes. I don't like that feeling of having a lash poking in my eye. So okay, next thing we're going to do is I'm going to open our eyes in a second. The first thing I'm going to do is actually stick her real lashes to the false lashes. So let's just make sure this is stuck down properly first. I think it is. Now open and look up. Okay. Right, what we're going to do now is I'm going to take some mascara, and this is a technique I've been using for years. I put a small amount of mascara on my fingers, look down, and I roll her real lashes into the false lashes. The reason I do that is because, one, it makes it more comfortable for her. Secondly, it doesn't ruin the actual lash. The whole point I've created these lashes is so that they look stunning on, and you shouldn't have to put mascara on them. If you put mascara on them, they start to look spidery and it ruins the shape of the lash. The only point of putting mascara with lashes on is so that your real lashes stick to your false lashes. That's the only point. So now that we've done that, we just want to add, there's a little bit that I can see we need to add to her inner corners, and I'm going to use a gel eyeliner for this. So you can see the inner corner of her eye, where it goes and meets the false lash, is a little bit bare. Okay, open and look that way, and we're going to just fill this gap in. Close. Open. And we're going to do the same on the other side. Look up that way. And look straight. Do you see how that's now giving it full look? Because you can see that gap there. Eyeliner. This is just a gel liner from Makeup Forever. And next thing we're going to do is just add some bronzer. I very rarely actually use blush. I'm going to add a small amount to her because I think she needs a little bit of blush. But we're going to use a slightly smaller brush. So I'm going to use the Marc Jacobs bronzer. It's one of my favourite bronzers. And this is where we're going to bronze her face, but not all over. We're just going to enhance her cheekbones. Just look that way. So where we actually contoured, we're going to apply it there, but I'm going to take it up into the temples a little bit. Face forward. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. And you can see even now I'm still buffing. I'm not moving the brush all over the face. Face me. Okay, look straight. And we're going to add a small amount of blush. I'm using the Charlotte Tilbury blush, and this one is Cheek to Chic, and it's in Ecstasy. I'm actually going to use a stipple brush. Now when I'm applying blush, I always use a stipple brush. The reason is when you go in with another brush, you're going in with this condensed amount of product. The trick is you want to disperse the product. So that's why you use a stipple brush, because it just disperses the product evenly over the face, because you don't want that big chunk of blush on your face. I'm just going over with another brush which just has some leftover setting powder on it. Now I'm going to, sounds like someone's taking the pictures. Now what we're going to do is apply some lip liner. I'm using the Bow and Arrow lip liner from Kat Von D. And very lightly and I'm going to blend that in now. With a liquid lipstick. So I'm using, I think this is 614 from Dior, and I mix. It's like a nude shade, and I'm mixing Kidman's Kiss from Charlotte Tilbury, just so that it adds a bit of colour, so it's not totally nude. I'm going to buff out the lip line first. I always do this with my finger because I like it to look just a little bit lived in. Just smell. Because we just want a very light stain. And the last thing that I'm going to do is just set the makeup. Just close your eyes with me. So that's MAC Fix Plus. You can use any kind of setting spray, to be honest. And then last thing that we're going to do is apply some highlighter. I always apply the highlighter after applying the setting spray, because I feel like it kind of sticks to the skin better. Okay, face that way for me. And just tilt your head about there. Face that way for me. And applying it just to the tops of her cheekbones. Straight ahead. And we're just going to apply a little bit to her chin, tip of her nose, and then that's it, you're done. Wow. So I hope you've liked it.
Wow.
She doesn't know what she looks like.
I don't know. I have no clue.
She has no idea.
Take your word for it.
Best part is it's so natural. Nothing cakey.
absolutely.
Yeah, the best part.
Nina's really good. Oh wow, I love it. Yeah. My eyebrows and the lashes are really nice.
Do you like them?
I love them. They feel so light, like I don't feel like I'm
Yeah.
they're
When
natural.
I created them, I wanted to create lashes that didn't feel so heavy. So I wanted them to feel very light on the eye. I didn't want them to feel like you're wearing anything, which you probably can tell now yourself from wearing them. But these are the second most popular that we have. These ones are called Amelia. So the ones that I'm wearing are called Nina, and these are called Amelia. So mine are obviously a little bit more dramatic than yours.
They're longer, I think.
Mine are much longer, but I like long lashes. Thank you so much. So feel free to take some pictures.
Knock me out.
Okay, I want to take some of you as well.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks very much.